Here I am, climbing up, feeling great, getting love. Here I go, risk it all, be worth it now, and that's for sure. Watch me as a Rocketeer, flying high.
Yeah, it wasn't quite 20 minutes to be fair, but remember I did the intro and I think we were starting to sort of get stuck into whatever the subject matter was, and I was just like, wow, that was a great intro, and you knew straight away where I was going with it. And, sure enough, it never saw the light of day, so we had to do it all over again. But that was our very first episode as well, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a good start. Yeah, but it's always good to learn lessons like that off the in the first episode.
Oh, well, look at us now. Episode 17 about to go down.
Exactly, that's right. Episode 17, Fight Talk Down Under, right here on Fight News Australia. I'm Dan Meehan, and of course my co-host is Lockjaw Justin Van Heerden. How are you, mate?
Doing good. As we know, camp's underway. The dad life is keeping me busy. Same old, but all my favourite things, so can't complain.
Absolutely, living the dream over there, mate. But we've got a huge episode for lucky number 17. We've got we'll cover off Demolition 6 from the weekend. I was in the building there. We've got some Aussie representatives in one championship this weekend. We've obviously got a big Eternal event, plenty to unpack there as well from last weekend, and we'll touch on the boxing as well. So we'll get stuck straight into it. So I was in the building for Demolition 6 down here in Melbourne on the weekend. So shout out to Wayne and the team there. It was another great event, fantastically well matched, mostly amateur card. But the one. I don't know if you got to see it, but the one pro fight of the evening was Abdullah Bieder versus Jack Lyons. Abdullah Bieder was also formerly known as El Tagani, but Abdullah's won the fight by split decision. Probably just a little bit too strong in the striking in the end, and managed to ward off the takedowns. So what did you make of that one?
Yeah, it was a split decision. But in saying that, I kind of watching the fight, seeing the exchanges, seeing the work that Abdullah was doing on the feet. I don't understand how he didn't finish the fight or put it away and make it convincing. And kind of I don't know how it ended up with the judges because watching it and even if you're now at the post fight sort of stuff, you look at the media, the photos, the videos, the stuff that's popping up. Well, the photos and that sort of stuff, like everything, it's all Abdullah pretty much. Like it's just him doing work. So I'm a bit weird on the fact that it went to a decision in the first place, and that the fact that it was split is a bit weird as well. But it is what it is. But I think the boys got after it. Fight was at lightweight, just for a title. So. I'm pretty sure it's Abdullah's first title fight that he's had and first Australian title, that he's won. So good on him. The dude's probably suited to lightweight. I think, he's obviously very tall, very long. He's fighting at featherweight a couple of times. So maybe this is the optimal weight class for him. And obviously we saw Jack in his first fight, or in his previous sort of fight, he fought Michael Stanoff and was able to get a decision win, a close decision in that one, which, that was another one where it could have gone either way. Like there's a good argument that, Michael won that fight. I can see the argument for Jack winning the fight. It's like, that's, so for him to go back to back two sort of tough fights, because, neither matchup there that was like a pushover opponent. He's taken tough fights with tough dudes. So I'm sure he's going to rebound and come back. But yeah, I think both guys kind of, whether it was not, I wouldn't say they held back a bit, but I think, both guys kind of didn't have the urgency to sort of have a convincing stamp on the fight, in my opinion. But, it was still a good fight, still a good event. There was, a couple of other fights that caught my attention and stood out a bit. But, so overall, I guess it's a successful night. But, I think for both those boys, I think there's still some work to do. But, it could be a combination of things too. Obviously, Abdullah's a hard dude to try and stand across from. He's long, he's lanky. He's got pretty crisp striking. So that would have been challenging. And then he's also fighting a lightweight, so maybe he's trying to find his feet a bit, trying to get used to having maybe a bit more sort of muscle or a bit more weight on the frame and trying to get used to that. So maybe that'll play a factor. Who knows? Because whatever weight you're used to being sort of at through your training camp, if that's the kind of weight range that you want to sit in after you've made weight and rehydrated, you don't want to go past that. And you definitely don't want to be under that because your body's just going to respond differently to things. So when you are throwing punches, when you are throwing kicks, when you are trying to like use your body in those grappling and wrestling exchanges, things are going to feel a bit weird if you're not sitting in that optimal performing thing that you've had through camp, if you know what I mean. So maybe for him stepping up in weight, maybe he made weight, rehydrated, maybe he was a bit heavier, carrying that little, that extra kilo or two for no good reason. That's not really benefiting him anyway. Maybe that was, taking a bit of a laboring effect on some of the shots that he was throwing and that, and that's why he wasn't able to put him away. But, these are all factors and things to consider and think about. But, regardless, it was a pretty good fight and a good way to cap off what was another successful event for Wayne and the team.
Yeah, look, it wasn't the only dodgy split decision on the night. So there was definitely a weak link on the judging panel on the night. But it looked like Abdullah was about to put Jack away in the fourth round. It looked like he was ready to go, but Jack hung tough and managed to sort of see through the round, but Abdullah sort of just tired a little bit in the last round. I think it was a 5-round fight, and maybe that was the extra weight he was carrying. But he did look good at lightweight in the end. His striking looked really crisp, and Jack took a lot of damage in the end, and did well to sort of tough it out to the end of the fight. So I think it was a good performance in the end from Abdullah. It was pretty impressive, and Jack's again just tough as nails, just hung in there, and he was pretty frustrated as the fight went on. He was sort of struggling to implement his game plan. He wasn't having really any success standing up, and he was managing to sort of keep Abdullah against the cage, but he was just struggling as Abdullah sort of spread his base. Jack was struggling to get hold of his legs and get him down. So that was kind of the way it went in the end. Yeah, no,
that's always going to be a factor when you're fighting someone who's, that tall and that long. Is you're going to have to make those adjustments if that's your game plan. If your game plan is to take him down and sort of exploit that area where maybe he's got a bit of a weakness or whatever, you can't. There's not like a one-dimensional approach when it comes to that area, like with anything. And whether that's, it's going to be hard for you to find someone who's the same sort of build, the same sort of height, and as him. It's so if you don't have opportunities to work with people that are that similar sort of frame, then the standard sort of go-to options or moves or takedowns or transitions that you have aren't, they're probably not going to work because you're dealing with a whole nother sort of body type and body frame. Like, for example, someone like him, if you've got like a single leg and you're a high crotch or whatever, you're probably not going to, have much success in that position because he is so tall and long and he can stay on his feet when you do try and lift him up. If you are trying to work them lower body attacks where you're going off the legs and that, he can spread his base a lot, so the better option might be to find those other avenues. But, that's something that's a learning experience from the fight, and moving forward, Jack's going to be able to like apply that, learn from it, make the adjustments, and it's only going to make him better. I mean, it's like it's early days yet, so there's plenty of room for improvement for him to sort of take out of the fight and put into his next sort of performance.
Absolutely. He's only 4 fights into his pro career. I think he's only 22 years old as well. So obviously Abdullah was he was a step up in competition, and I'm sure he would have learnt a lot from it. So, those fights are only going to benefit you in the long run, really.
100%.
Now, this weekend we've got One Championship is back in action, and we've got a few Aussies on the card. It's the event is called 158. Now, I think that's too many ones for one name. If that's
too many.
I don't know if I could fit one into that sentence any more times, but one. But anyway, that's a little bugbear aside. We have an Australian making his pro debut. It was only just announced that he had signed with One Championship only a week or so ago. It's Duke Didier. He's taking on Jazur Mirzamuhammadov. Now, I've been rehearsing that before the podcast, so you're welcome. Don't ask me to repeat it. But the opponent is Uzbek, and just doing a dive on his record, he's mostly fought at home and in Kazakhstan. So information's pretty scarce, but we know that they're pretty tough. He's 36 years old, so he's going to have some old man strength about him. I imagine he looks like a pretty stocky fella. So Duke's going to have his work cut out in his first fight. But it's a fun story. Duke actually got into the ring. At Demolition on the weekend with Jimmy Crute and kind of told his story about how his career, how he was told by doctors that he was never going to be able to fight again due to a blood clotting condition in his legs, and he found a surgeon that would sort of do the job, look after him, and he had a few surgeries, and now he's been cleared to fight. He had a win I think earlier this year back in Canberra, and now he's been signed to one championship, and he's taking on Jasur Mirza Makhmadov.
Yep. Say that 5 times, you might appear in a mirror. That's super creepy.
Yeah, I think 2 is enough for this podcast. I'm not going to try that again. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
No, it's going to be an interesting matchup. I think, I'm stoked for Duke though, because he's like another dude that just seems like super likable, And if he's hanging around with Jimmy Crute, he's got to be a legend because, Jimmy doesn't give anyone the time of day unless he's pretty certain that they're pretty sick. So if he's hanging out with Jimmy and the team and getting after it, then he's for sure going to be a bloke that we want to get behind and support.
Absolutely, and it's probably more about the story than the fight. Really, it's kind of just a triumphant thing, just stepping in the cage in one championship. So it's a fun one.
Yeah, it's a good matchup for him to sort of get in there, find his feet, make his debut in that promotion. And, he's got access to a lot of eyeballs because obviously I know they fluff their numbers up a little bit. I'm not convinced that they're like completely legit, but still, regardless, there's going to be a bunch of people watching. It's a great sort of stage to make a debut on and kind of showcase your skills. And it's, there's a few other fights on the card that are cracking fights. So there's for sure people going to be paying attention. So now that's a good opportunity for Duke to go out there and, put on the show, bash a bloke, potentially get a finish and, steal some sort of hype and fans and everything and bring it back home to Australia.
Absolutely, and it's the largest sporting property in the world, haven't you heard, mate? So wash your mouth out.
Bigger than anything we've ever seen before. So we have to watch out. But
Absolutely.
Hey, one championship seems like they're treating the Aussies pretty good, and then the people from the region. So I'm stoked that we got another one in there, and it just looks like it's all things are heading the right way. Absolutely,
and another Aussie on the card is Simon Carson. It's one that sort of snuck under the radar for me. I didn't actually realise he was on the roster, but he's a 2-1 fighter, another heavyweight from Absolute down here in Melbourne. So he's taking on Marcus Almeida, who's 2-0. It's obviously a pretty tough matchup in his first fight in one championship. Almeida's a pretty highly credentialed BJJ practitioner, and he's already had a couple of submission wins in one championship against some pretty good opposition. So Simon's definitely drawn a tough card first up.
Yeah, I believe Simon's the head coach at Absolute, if I'm not mistaken. So he's out here coaching, he's out here training, and now he's out here fighting in one championship. So good on him. Tough matchup. Buchecha's going to be a handful. The dude's a beast. I actually, I think when I was probably 23, I'd say 23, 24, I got to attend one of his seminars, and he's a mammoth of a human being. He's a big dude, and he's very, very strong, and obviously, very credentialed grappler. So there's going to be no surprises in there. We know what he's going to do. He's going to come out. He's going to look to get his hands on Simon and utilize, that area that he is so predominantly skilled in. But if Simon's, taking this matchup, then he's got to have some, faith in himself and confidence to get in there and do that, and to not be fazed by the task in front of him. And training at Absolute, man, he's got access to very talented sort of training partners, people to bounce some sort of good rounds off of. And obviously in the grappling side of things, you got guys like Lockie Giles and stuff like that are going to be helping you with those areas. So I imagine he's going to be ready and prepared for those sort of situations that potentially get in the grappling side of things. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. It's definitely a sort of a tough matchup to sort of draw, but hey, who knows? You know, you can't pick against Aussie, so keen to see what he's going to bring for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a vote of confidence from one championship as well. They obviously believe in Simon's abilities if they're going to give him an assignment like this first up. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes, whether he can sort of keep his distance and land something on the way in, land something nasty. And yeah, I mean, it would be a huge win if he can pull it off. Then he's really going to announce himself because obviously Buchecha's a well-known fighter in one championship.
And also, the heavyweight division is kind of, like in any promotion, the heavyweight division, it's kind of one of those divisions where you only need like a couple wins, and then you're kind of putting yourself in front ahead of everyone, so you can kind of cement yourself already with.
Yeah, like I was saying before, we had some technical difficulties there. The heavyweights are only sort of one punch away from turning the tide. So see if Carson can pull off the big upset in one championship there. But speaking of well-known fighters in one championship, I know you'll be excited about this matchup. But it's Reece McLaren is taking on Shi Wei.
Yeah, cool. It should be. It should be a good fight. It's a good fight for Reece, this one. It's an interesting matchup. I think he's going to have the capability to get this fight to the mat and do his thing. It's obviously where he's the best. That's where he's the most comfortable. It's where his kind of path to victory lies. The guy's got some slick submissions and slick grappling transitions. I mean, I'm interested to see it. I want to see, can he kind of find his way to the mat, and how quickly is he going to be able to do that? It's another one of those sort of matchups. It's pretty much all his fights are going to be striker versus grappler type style matchups a lot of the time, because that's where his biggest pedigree is. I'm sure he's working on his whole MMA game as a whole, and I'm sure he works on his striking and stuff like that, but going from fight to fight.
He trains at Bunchu with John Wayne Parr, so I often wonder whether he might fancy himself in the striking realm as well in his in the subsequent fights.
Exactly, he's made that sort of swap, because he obviously, I mean, for his whole, I'm not sure if he still does some MMA training at Puma, because that's obviously where he was originally based under Vince Perry. But if he's training his striking with John Wayne Parr, I'm sure we're going to see those sort of leaps of improvement happen now, as opposed to if you looked at some of his sort of previous fights, and the improvements in between weren't too crazy, and whether that could be just a lack of kind of throwing yourself into that fire and actually making those improvements in those areas. But the grappling and then stuff like that's always on point for Reece, so that's kind of in his back pocket. So it's gonna be interesting to see what he can do. It's a winnable matchup for him for sure. I don't think it's like one of those ones where you're kind of going like, this guy's got a few more weapons or a few more tools that he can use to sort of end the fight or kind of give Reece problems. I mean, he definitely is going to be, a handful, and he's obviously a skilled martial artist in his own right. But I think it's pretty clear and safe bet to put a submission in like round 2. It's good. I think that's a good bet to make. Reece by submission in round 2, and if you wanna know what he might go for, or you think I'd say it's going to be between like an Anaconda or a Das. I'm going to give you a prediction on a submission there.
There you go. Yeah, if there's any sort of betting agencies that have got some submission bets in there, then you've just got the tip there. You're welcome. So, but Shi Wei, he's on a 3-fight win streak, so he's obviously no mug. But McLaren, he's obviously coming off the loss to Yuya Wakamatsu, which it was really a close to a number 1 contender fight. So really a win for Reece McLaren. He's still ranked number 5 over there in one championship. So a win will, could put him right back in the mix. And the champs Adriano Moraes, there's Mighty Mouse in the in the division as well. So there's opportunities there if he can get through this fight. With a win, then he's off to the races. He's still within touching distance of those sorts of opportunities. So yeah, it's a big one for Reece.
Yeah, you need to go out there and kind of take that hype now, go get a big win, hopefully a finish, and then put yourself back in the mix for potentially a contender fight or, whatever sort of ahead. Obviously a matchup with these matchups with like guys like Mighty Mouse, that's going to benefit you tremendously. And if you can get a win over someone like that, then it's going to put you right where you need to be.
Absolutely. And also this weekend we've got George Kambosos Jr. is obviously defending his belts against Devin Haney. They're sort of they're fighting for all the chockies. So it's a big unification fight. Obviously, we know that Kambosos is coming off the win over Teofimo Lopez, which was a huge upset to sort of capture the belts. And Devin Haney is sort of a guy who's sort of the new breed of fighter. He's only 23 years old, I think, and he's got that sort of slick style that a lot of these young fighters do coming through. And George is just going to have to do what he does, just pressure, and see if he can break him like he's done so many times before. So what do you make of this one?
Yeah, well, if the stare down's anything to go on, then it's going to be an intense sort of fight. George usually, he's always good for, like we were talking about. He's always good for that. He's always good for giving those intense stare downs, and he's slick. He's not just slick with his hands. The dude's slick with his words as well. So it's always keeps me interested. But yeah, it's an interesting fight. It's a tough matchup, but it's one that all these fights that he's going for, he's throwing himself in the fire. He really believes he's the best in the world by a lot. So he's confident in taking these fights. And if the Teofimo Lopez fight's anything to go off, the guy is certainly that. He seems like he's right up there as one of the best. Well, he is the best. If we get, and so it's an interesting fight though. Haney's obviously a tough matchup. The dude's talented. He's slick. He's fast. Dude packs a punch. He's as you go in boxing, there's often times you think in a sport where you're just using your hands. You hear guys sometimes say, "Oh, well, this guy's a really good puncher. This guy's, a great puncher." And Haney is certainly someone that is a really good puncher. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Obviously, it's for everything. It's fighting fighting in front of a capacity crowd at Marvel Stadium. You're going to have like all the eyeballs on you. The lights are going to be on. You're going to have like the who's who of the sports world in attendance, and other sort of avenues as well. Celebrities, all that hype. People are just going to be coming out to support it. Unfortunately, Alexander Volkanovski is going to be there, but we don't need to blow that guy up anymore. Yeah, Some guy, I think they call him Alex the Great, but we don't need to blow him up too much. So it's obviously going to be it's going to be a massive event. So I'm excited. I'm hyped up. It's getting me really excited, not just about boxing, but Australian boxing and where it's at and where it's going.
Yeah, it seems a really obvious thing that a professional boxer would be a good puncher, but for those who are sort of uninitiated, there is a difference between a boxer and a puncher in the in the boxing terminology. But like you say, like the stare downs are great, and there's been some really great sort of hype and media coverage around this one, and this is all great for Australian boxing. Like, it's a great thing that that Kambosos has come back here to Australia and he's brought a fight like this to home soil, because this is what we need. We're still kind of there's a new wave of Australian fighters coming through, and we really need eyeballs on these fighters to bring Australian boxing back to where it used to be, because we've kind of been in recovery from the sort of green and mundane era. So George Kambosos, he's full of belief, and he really, like you say, he believes he's the best fighter in the world, and he was a heavy underdog against Lopez and he got it done, and he's going to be a heavy underdog again this time. And but I don't know, it's hard to bet against him. The guy's just full of confidence, and I think his abilities, he's got more ability than people give him credit for.
100%, man. You don't have people like Manny Pacquiao giving you fucking props if you can't get out there and perform, and you don't have that sort of special aura and talent about you. These guys aren't going to give you the props that you're sort of getting if you aren't able to sort of get in there and perform and showcase that it's not all just talk and that. It's like you're a guy that does the work, and he's another fighter that's kind of like that, man. The guy just seems like he's just out there working, doing the work, getting himself as ready as possible, and then getting in there and getting to perform, and doing so with a chip on his shoulder, because every time, more often than not, the guy's just the underdog going into these fights, and look what he's able to do. Arguably now, he's probably going to have a even more confidence going into this Haney fight, because I'd imagine, I'd put Lopez up there as probably one of, if not the hardest puncher in the division, and Kambosos was able to, wear some of those punches, wear some of those shots, and go out there and do his thing. For me, this is a tough matchup. You got to give Haney the respect that he deserves. The guy is very, very good. He's very, very sleek. But I still feel like Kambosos is going to have that extra bit of confidence about him going in. And he's said a few times that if he could have it his way, if the world was sort of different at the moment, then he would have wanted the Lomachenko fight because he sees that as being the hardest matchup for him. Out of all the sort of people ahead, he thinks that Lomachenko is probably the harder matchup of them all. And I'm inclined to agree with the guy. I'm not saying he's should be looking past Haney, and we definitely can't disrespect Haney by that, saying it's going to be a cakewalk. But I've got to back the Aussie, and I feel like he's going to go out there, perform, do what he's got to do, and and then keep bringing these big fights back to Australia and keep sort of cementing himself as one of the best to ever do it if he continues down this pathway. Because all these guys that he's fighting, it's not like they're all in their primes. They're all it's not like he's fighting these dudes who are a couple of years past where they're meant to be. He's fighting these dudes, like you sort of said. Haney's a young dude. Lomachenko's in his prime. Lopez is for sure. He's a young dude too in his prime. So it's kind of this is what you want. This is what separates you from, I guess, the other sort of fighters in your generation.
Absolutely, yeah, and like you say, the opportunities are there. If he can get it done on Sunday, then Lomachenko, that'd be huge here in Australia. That guy's unreal. So that would be that would be a marquee event right there. And obviously with every win, Kambosos' profile is only gonna lift. So it's all to fight for on Sunday. Not to mention all the belts. So all the chockies on the line. But also this weekend, we've got Skye Nicholson. We've just spoken about Skye Nicholson not long ago because she's sort of been reading from the Meehan and Eternal playbook there. She's pretty much fighting every second week at the moment. She's for her fourth fight in 3 months since making her pro debut. She's she's back in the ring in the UK there. So she's taking on Gabriella Bouvier, who's a former IBF world champion and a WBC world title challenger. So she's 25 fights under her belt. So again, this is obviously a big step up for Skye Nicholson and just another fighter who's on the way up, who's obviously full of belief. Bouvier's been inactive for 3 years, but she's only 30 years old. Again, it's not like she's cherry picking someone who's past their prime. She's taking on a much more experienced fighter with a world title fights under her belt. So obviously Eddie Hearn and the Matchroom team and obviously Skye, they have huge belief in her, and this is going to be a big test.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit different in boxing with with layoffs as opposed to a sport like MMA, because boxing is notorious. Boxers are notoriously known for pretty much fighting in their training sessions and their sparring sessions. As their camps go, if they're in camp, it's a bit different. They pick their sparring partners. Things are a bit more sort of controlled, and it's all structured, and everything's set up a different way. But when you're just sort of generally training, I don't know if people some people, there's people out there probably listening, they'll know if you go into a boxing gym and you're just there training and you don't have any fights coming up and you're sparring and you're pretty much fighting. So, I expect she's with this layoff, it's going to not really make too much of a sort of dent on her ability to get out there and get after and perform. And like you said, she's not a slouch. She's got a lot more fights under her belt than Skye does. But, Skye being active and just, keeping the sort of the ball rolling and going from fight to fight to fight like this and kind of staying active and staying ready is, obviously going to benefit her as well. Because, there's that's the approaches that you can there's the difference in approaches, but it's always going to be, the person that's been more active, you're going to have to give them that little bit of extra credit and a bit of confidence because, they are fighting and although, like I sort of said, inactivity in boxing is a bit different as opposed to, other combat sports. But at the same time, Skye's reactions, her distance, everything like that's going to be a bit more on point because she did just fight not too long ago and she's just churning them over just one after the other. So, I feel like it's obviously a step up for her, but an opportunity for her to go out there and showcase that she's all about it. She's in her pro career. She's trying to go for it. She's not here messing around. So I feel like, that's a big vote of confidence from her team and everyone to sort of put this fight together. So I'm sure she's going to go out there and kill it. I'm certainly not going to pick against her because she's she's just out here fighting all the time. She's just doing the work and putting on some performances. So I'm pretty hyped. I'm hyped to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely, and yeah, she's only 3 months into her pro career, so you know. I guess they must see something that that they must believe that she can get it done. And she's obviously got Olympic level boxing skills, so they obviously believe that she can get it done. So I'm not sure that they're going to be sort of fast tracking her into a world title or anything like that. We know that the pathway to a world title is a fair bit quicker in some of the female divisions, but she's only 3 months in, so they obviously believe that this is the right step up for her, because she's being managed by some influential people, so they're not going to throw her in there against someone who's just going to eat her alive.
No, certainly not. Especially like you sort of said, it was so big on building your fighter up in boxing, keeping that undefeated sort of record and progressing forward that way. So, every time it is just going to be, if you're going to do it the right way, it is just going to be a gradual sort of step up. And in between some of those gradual sort of step ups, it's not going to be uncommon to see, a few feeder fights here and there just to sort of get that confidence up a bit more and, get that extra bit of sort of ring time. But yeah, I think they're doing it the right way. They're approaching it the right way. And obviously she's got a lot of self-belief within herself as an individual. So it's all going to benefit moving forward. If you keep, just stay on the path, keep doing it this way. You rely on your actual boxing ability, rely on the training and the work that you're doing, and relying on the fact that you're sort of just confident enough to keep putting yourself out there, fight after fight after fight in very quick succession like this. And it's going to allow her to keep performing and keep getting these wins, and then eventually build herself up to a world title fight.
Exactly, and she's got nothing but time. But now we've got to get to Eternal 66. We're going to recap the weekend's events. It was another fun event for Eternal. There's always some drama and excitement from the weekend, and the event had a bit of everything. But we'll start with your team, mate. We've got to cover this off. Obviously, Amina Hadaya. I know you've got a bit to say about this one. There was a bit of a one-sided fight in the end against Jasmine Nakora on the prelim card.
Yeah, so obviously it was Amina's like just getting after it. She's just fighting all the time. So she jumped back in on the weekend. She fought Jasmine Nakora, who credit to her, credit to Jasmine for asking to fight someone like Amina, who's more experienced. She's already she's being as active as she is, and she's a dangerous sort of fight to have for your debut. Credit to Jasmine, but in my opinion, a bit ill-advised as well from that sort of side of things. That's not a knock on her. That's a knock on her team. It's a bit of an ill-advised sort of idea to think that, you can do that in your debut. If it'd be different if it was like you've had a few fights already, and then you're fighting someone who might have like you might say if she was like 3-4 fights in as an amateur, and then she's fighting someone who's maybe got 8 or 9 fights. That's a bit different. For your debut, when you don't know how it's going to feel when you're in there, you're fighting in a packed stadium in Perth in front of your nearest and dearest. The lights are on, the cameras are on. That's all things. It's certainly not just a small show somewhere with like only a handful of people where you're kind of just getting out there and you can perform, and it's not as nerve-wracking. Like, it's nerve-wracking, but it's not as crazy. Like, that's a hell of a situation to be in to make your debut. You're fighting it on a massive sort of stacked Eternal card in Perth. So that would have all played a factor, man. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's not so much the tough task with the actual fight itself. It's the emotions that she and everything that she would have been going through, being that it was her first fight as well, and the atmosphere that's there and what you're going to absorb in. And I think you kind of saw that. Like, I'm around the game a lot. Like, I fight myself, so I'm going to be able to pick out these little things. But even on the walkout, like, you could tell, you could almost pick the exact moments when the nerves and the adrenaline started hitting her, and you could kind of tell that it was definitely playing a factor. But credit to her, the fight started. Amina pressed forward with her pace and pressure. And throwing punches in bunches. But, for the first couple of seconds and first sort of bit there, Jasmine kind of, stood her ground, bit down and threw back and was able to land a couple of shots that kind of made Amina reset a bit and go, all right, what am I doing? Let me just fight from range. Let me do what I do. And, then after that, she was obviously able to find success. And then ultimately we saw her sort of clip Jasmine and follow up with 22 punch combo, I think I counted before the ref stopped it. So, obviously, I'm stoked for my teammate. I'm going to give her lots of props and be high up on her because she's obviously putting in the work. She's being active. She's fighting all the time. And she's just a genuinely nice person. And I think, obviously, she had a chip on her shoulder with how the decision of the last fight went. And, she saw her after the fight. She asked, she was pretty keen on fighting very soon again. And, she wouldn't mind that Selena Mongi sort of rematch. But, I kind of sort of said we were obviously a couple of us from the gym were having like a watch party for her fight on the Sunday. And I kind of just said it then. I was like, I don't think that Selena would ever take that rematch with her because, it's one of those scenarios where you're like, you were fortunate to get the win. Why take the risk of, take it and run. Why take the risk? So, unless you're being forced to, like in a situation where they're both pros, and you're fighting for, there's no one else that's sort of there to fight. You have to take that fight because it's like there's a contender series potential call up on the line or something like that. Who knows? Then you're going to have to see if you're probably going to have to take it and be about it. But it was another good night for the team, for the freestyle team, and everyone was stoked. So Amina's just right now Amina's the most active fighter in the gym by a long shot. So she's out here just leading from the front, killing it.
Absolutely, and on the main card as well, we'll do the sort of the main three fights, I guess. Toby Meach got away with a split decision against Nick Thornton in what was an incredibly close fight. Like, I think Nick Thornton came in with a 1-3 record, perhaps on the coming into the show, and he looked better than his record suggests. He did pretty well. He was really game, really tough, and he had some real skills and. It kind of felt like maybe he had a case for having won the fight. What do you reckon?
I watched it back today because I wanted to do that.
Oh, you did?
Watch it. Yeah, I watched it back today because I wanted to watch it back before we obviously recorded our episode. But 1 and 2, rounds 1 and 2 clearly went to Nick. Like round 1 was close, but I think Nick did enough to edge that round. Round 2 was decisively Nick's round. Like he really turned it on in that round, did a lot of damage, had a lot of control, was on Toby's back for a big portion of the round. So, that was a pretty decisive round to Nick. Round 3, another close round. Obviously, Toby turned it up in round 3 a bit, with his striking. I think he got after it a bit. I think he got kind of by, the guys in his corner, like, Ryan Gray, and that they must have told him, you got to get after it. So, he did that a bit. He did in the 3rd round. I think he buzzed Nick like twice where I was like, but just didn't follow up. Like he had him wobbled. I think, there's a couple of times there where you kind of saw him, he landed like an uppercut left hook and you sort of saw Nick go like slump down and kind of just shell up, and then Toby kind of just let off. And there's something that I always, that's sort of spoken about. Like we talk about it in the gym all the time. It's like, you see it so much. People come in, throw their punches, land their combination, and then get all the way back out. And then they come back, throw their punches, land the combination, get all the way back out. And it's like, it's kind of what Toby did, That was a close round, but I gave that round to Toby. I think he, damage-wise, he did a bit more. So I was happy. If that's the round, if you're going to give Toby any rounds, a round in that fight, that's the round I'd give him. But yeah, for my money, it was 2-1 to Nick, and he lost a split decision, and now he's like 1-4, but I certainly don't think he lost that fight. And the dude's obviously very skilled. Trains us to the kickboxing. The dude's obviously quite handy, and he showcased that on the night. And Toby as well. He's made the move to Scrappy. He was previously based in Brisbane, trying to get integrated under Adrian Payne. The guy moved to Perth, based himself at Scrappy under Ben Vickers, training alongside guys like Rod Costa, Josh Della, Jack Della, you name it, Jack Becker. Like he's got a stable of killers alongside him. So, he's obviously in good hands, and you can see the improvements that he's made in some areas since his last performance. I think the last time he fought before this was against Sam Hibbard. Obviously, he got caught quite quickly, lost by submission in that one, but. The guy showcased again in this fight. In round 2, there was a few times where Nick was getting close on some rear naked choke attempts that he was going for, but Toby was able to sort of rally up and survive and force the fight into a third round. But end of the day, Toby got away with it with a decision, but that's not his job. It's not his team's job to judge the fight. Like, they did their job. They showed up and fought. So as much as it sucks for Nick and as much as it throws a cloud over the fact that Toby did win, got the win, I'd say, it's not really their thing to worry about. You just got to go out there and perform. And if you're lucky enough to win a close decision or win a split decision and come away with a win, then you just got to take that and run with it. But I feel like both guys, they still, you could see that there was that lack of emphasis in certain scenarios where they could have potentially finished the fight. I know Nick was obviously trying to do that in the second round. For my money, I would have thought he would come out in the third round and look to put the fight exactly where it was again and put a stamp on it in that way. But then, and with Toby, same sort of thing. A few times he was landing some hard shots. He clearly was, putting the work in, damaging Nick, but just didn't capitalize on it. And, for both guys, it's kind of like, you can't then, even if the decision went to Nick, and I'm sure Toby and his team would have, felt, because obviously they clearly felt like it was 2 rounds to Toby. I saw a bunch of people from his team post on socials and say that they think he won rounds 1 and 3. So but I feel like if the decision was read the other way and Nick won a split decision or whatever the case may be, it's going to be the same thing. Toby and his team are going to be disappointed, being like, we thought we won. But at the end of the day, if you are going to the judges, you're not unless you've gotten a couple 10-8 rounds and you're pretty certain you've outclassed your opponent and completely dominated them. Yeah, you got to just know that there's a potential chance it's going to get snatched away from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, that they say to never leave it in the hands of the judges, and it was a close fight. Mixed martial arts scoring there's so many variables, and it's so open to interpretation the way this sport is judged. I don't think we can really complain too much about which way the decision goes. I felt like Thornton did enough, but that's I'm just an armchair expert, so who gives a shit?
But you got to look at it too. Obviously, so people, like you said, people are going to have preferences in watching fights in sports as well. If you got people judging the fight, if someone might be judging the fight, watching the fight, and their main sort of emphasis or thing that stands out for them might be the striking side of things. So if someone's doing a bit more on the striking and doing a bit more damage and throwing a bit more on the feet, they might be looking at that going, okay, and that outweighs the rest of it. But then you might have a close round where someone's doing a bit more damage on the feet, but then the other person gets some control against the cage or on the ground, and for another judge, that might be the crucial part they look at and go, well, he took him down and got control, and then all of a sudden, that's how they're sort of scoring that round. So it's always going to be a weird thing. Judging isn't a job that I ever want to have to do. I don't ever want to be in a position where I have to judge fights. I mean, I feel like me, as opposed to just some random who doesn't really train or compete or anything like that, is probably going to be a better option. But even then, it's not a job, it's a hard job. It's not one that I feel like, people are jumping out of their seat to go out and do. I'm glad my job's the simple one. I just got to get in there and fight, really. But yeah, so yeah, like you said, can't really be too upset about how it sort of played out, but it's just one of those things where unless you're dominating the other person from bell to bell, you got to know going in for that, waiting for that judge's decision, that there's a chance that your hand is not going to get raised, and then that's just how it is.
Absolutely, and one fight that didn't make it that far to the judges' scorecards was Cody Hadden versus Jarrett Wilbraham, and it was touted as a battle of two up and coming prospects. Obviously Jarrett was undefeated coming into the fight. Cody was 2-1, but his loss was obviously to Steve Erceg, which is probably something that's ahead of schedule for someone of his age. But It was a really fun fight while it lasted. Jarrett came out really strong. He looked like he was in control, and then once Cody found his range, he he's just so physically strong and so like fast and explosive. He looked really good, and he managed to sort of close the show in round 3 with some ground and pound. Kind of looked like he kind of might have sort of buzzed Jarrett Wilbraham in the takedown. It's kind of like, I don't know, a bit of a shoulder or something that sort of sort of buzzed him, and then he closed the show with ground and pound. So what did you make of Cody Hadden's performance?
Yeah, it's a killer performance, killer win, a good name to have on your record. Obviously, Jarrett was undefeated coming into the fight. Cody was coming off the Stephen Erceg fight, which was highly entertaining, and obviously a loss for him, but still, it was a highly entertaining fight. The kid's good. Both guys are super talented. Both guys had a lot riding on taking this fight and coming in there. But yeah, while it lasted, it was exactly what we thought it was going to be. If that went the distance and that, we'd be, it'd be right up there for fight of the night, because, the guys were getting after it. There's some crazy scrambles. Jarrett started off real strong, but kind of looked like after a few of the first scrambles, it kind of looked like he gassed a bit. I think, I'm not sure what the factors were that played a factor there. Was it, a combination? I don't think he cut that much weight, but I know he's pretty tall, but, was it the weight cut? Was it the trip over to Perth? All those things play a factor. So I don't know if there's he might have, but it looked to me like, from my opinion, it looked to me like after a few of the first exchanges and scrambles and that, he looked a bit weathered after that. And then obviously once Cody started finding his range, his amateur boxing sort of experience showed a bit there. He was able to land some hard and fast shots. And obviously the finish, something that analyst Volk pointed out to me actually when we were talking about the fight, credit him for this, was obviously normally if someone's going for a takedown like that, and they lock up, they're staying real tight and attaching themselves to the hips, and they're pulling someone, you're pulling someone off the cage, you're going to sort of land with the control on their hips. It was almost like when Cody got around him, got around his legs and pulled, he kind of loosened up. And I don't know if he did that intentionally or if it just slipped. And then obviously, instead of then coming down and landing, controlling the hips, it's like Jarrett slid through that bit further and his shoulder actually landed on Jarrett's head when he hit the ground. So he was out with the takedown. Like, he was starched with the takedown. The combination of the shoulder and all your weight, like all of Cody's weight, landing on his head as it bounced off the canvas, that just put him to sleep. So I counted this, the 8 elbows that followed was completely just, to an unconscious dude. So that's it. So that ref, I don't know what the fuck he was doing, but, because initially I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I was like, maybe from the angle that he was standing at, he couldn't see it. But then I watched the replay back. He's right there. The dude's unconscious. Like, you want to tell me that you can't see old mate's head just bouncing off the canvas like that as he's just getting elbowed? Like, and I counted, there's 8 or 9, almost 9 elbows before the ref jumped in. So I was a bit triggered or unhappy by the stoppage. But other than that, both guys just got in there, got after it, and threw the kitchen sink at each other. You saw Jarrett land a few flying knees. There was some crazy scrambles against the fence and on the ground and stuff like that. So, they got after it for as long as the fight lasted. It was very entertaining. But yeah, big win for Cody. Kind of, puts him in a good spot now to, moving forward in the division. So it'd be interesting to see what's next for him. And then obviously for Jarrett, it's his first loss. It's going to be interesting to see how he recovers, rebounds off that. And it's only going to it's going to be, just a stepping stone for him and what's still a very promising mixed martial arts career. Like, I don't think the guy's going to miss a step, really. I mean, he's just got to, work on a few things, maybe sort out, I don't know if it's the weight cut or the conditioning or something, but, it looked like the guy was a bit gassed in there. And even in the Jamie Hunt fight that he had, I saw a bit of that too. It seemed like the guy was a bit spent after some of the exchanges. Obviously, he rallied up in that fight, was able to, put on a performance and get the win. But in this fight, it kind of, opened the door for Cody to just sort of do his thing and run away with it. But I'm pretty excited for both guys. I'm pretty excited to see what's next for both guys. I'm excited to see what potential matchups we're going to see for either guy moving forward as the year progresses.
Yeah, well, Cody Hadden's sort of thrust himself right into the sort of the top echelon of the division now. Like with Sean Etchell, he's obviously competing for a place in the UFC roster, so that might open up the bantamweight title completely. So Cody Hadden's put himself right in the mix, and there's going to be some fun matchups for him there. And for Jarrett Wilbraham, he's obviously taken some unnecessary damage in the end. So hopefully, he's not too worse for wear, and he can get sort of back in there and get back on track. But a guy like that, he's obviously not far off the reckoning either. He's only a couple of fights away from being in contention. Obviously a talented guy, so there's still plenty of time for both of those boys. But the main event, we've got to get to the main event. It was obviously a pretty gruesome scene in the end. It was a big anticlimax, really. Like it was a it was a fun fight, even though like Becker and Aguilera they had fought before. It's still a fun fight on paper. Like it's a fun matchup, and it sort of shaped up well. Aiden Aguilera, he walked to the cage and he looked like he had the fire in the belly. The stage was set. Jack Becker's, obviously fighting for what we think would have been a place in the, at least on the Contender Series. So, there was everything to fight for both guys. And then 22 seconds in, Jack Becker throws a leg kick, and Aiden sort of checks it just on the knee there, and Becker's leg snapped, and that was all she wrote. So what did you make of that scene?
I'll put it to you this way: the leg break wasn't the most gruesome thing that was happening in that scenario. Did you see Aiden Aguilera's haircut? Can we talk about that? That was pretty fucking gruesome, let me tell you. Anyway, but obviously, very unfortunate situation. But both boys came out straight away and were just throwing heavy. Like they weren't looking to feel out nothing. Like both boys were putting some pop on everything, and that's the game you play when you're throwing hard kicks like that. And another, especially naked kicks, as we call them, without a setup, without a sort of thing to bridge off, whether it's a feint or, a punch or something like that, you're throwing naked hard kicks like that. Yeah, it's going to be easier for your opponent to check them and for something catastrophic to happen, as we saw. So, and and people, I saw a bunch of people talking about it and stuff like that, and people were like, "Oh, it's unfortunate." It is unfortunate. I don't get me wrong; it's fucking very unfortunate for Jack, but they made it seem like it was it's obviously in part a freak accident, but at the same time, not really, because Aiden checked the kick. He turned his leg out, placed his knee out there, and Jack caught the knee, and that kind of it was a really shit scenario that it had to go that way, but. You still got to give credit to what caused that to happen, and it was just some really good defensive awareness from Aiden there, and you could tell it's something that he obviously worked in his camp, because in the first fight there was something that was a bit hard for him to deal with. In the first fight, he copped a few of them kicks, and I think that kind of took a toll as well. But it's a shit way for it to end. But both guys were pretty classy about it, and both guys were obviously. Wanted a different sort of outcome. I think we all did. We wanted to watch these dudes bang it out potentially for 25 minutes and give us this, sort of entertaining fight after all the build up that we've had for like almost a year or whatever. I'm like, part of me is like frustrated and annoyed that we didn't get to see that. But the other part of me is just thankful that, that even though it is a leg break and stuff like that, it's not something more catastrophic, and the guys hopefully going to be able to recover, heal up, get back in there, and regardless of the situation and how it kind of panned out, you got to be happy for Aiden, man. The dude is coming off some losses. He's kind of put himself in a really good spot, fighting on the biggest promotion in the country, and now he's the lightweight champ. So it'd be interesting to see how quickly he turns around and gets back in there, because he said himself he wants to kind of get in there and defend the belt to make it feel a bit more legitimate. And then obviously, Becker's got a bit of a recovery ahead of him, but I'm sure that dude's going to be back in there as soon as humanly possible. And obviously, we spoke about, we saw on the socials, he's in good spirits. He's making jokes and putting up some photos with some funny captions. And I heard he was making jokes on the stretcher to some of the boys when he was on his way out. So, that's what you kind of expect from someone like that. So, obviously me and I imagine they are, and the whole MMA community that sort of watched that, obviously going to be bummed by how it turned out. But, it's only going to be one of the, I feel like for both guys, it's going to be a blimp in their careers and in their timelines that we're going to look back on for both guys and be like, oh, like remember when this happened, and now look at what's happening, look at where they are, look at what they're achieving. So I don't think it's going to I don't think it's going to hinder Jack too much. At least I hope it doesn't. But yeah, obviously it's a pretty rough road ahead for him now. And for Hadden, he's got a list of killers in that division, because that's a pretty stacked division with some talented dudes. Obviously the fight that everyone's going to be thinking might get thrown together is that Martinez fight. Dave Martinez is actually down here at freestyle training at the moment. So yeah, he's out here for a couple of weeks doing some work with us, and I'm sure that's a fight that he's going to now be really keen for. He obviously called for it at the last show after he won in what was a memorable call out. And then we got Hadden, who's the champ now, a belt that Dave, held as well already. So, he's a former Eternal champion. So it's going to be interesting to see if that's the matchup they throw together. You got guys like Dan Hill, Josh Togo, they're all sort of in the mix. You got Dimps Gillies, who just, come off that fight of the year, so maybe he's kind of thrown himself in a good position to maybe get another win or whatever. And then, he might be fighting for the belt. We got my other friend and training partner, Blake Donnelly, who's lurking and potentially can throw himself in the mix. So yeah, it's exciting times to be part of that and watching that lightweight division sort of pan out. So I feel like for Hadden, now's your opportunity. You got the belt, you go out there, defend it a couple of times. And like we spoke about when we sort of previewed this fight, this was sort of a do or die for him almost in a sense. So although it's a shit way for it to pan out, it's kind of a blessing for him as well, because now you have the belt, you're going to be able to defend it on a massive platform, which is Eternal MMA, and that's going to if you're able to do that, you go out there, defend it 2 or 3 times, you're going to be able to like put yourself in a really good spot, and you'll be off to the races, and might be fighting in the UFC, Bellator 1 Championship, who knows, PFL, or who knows.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that a leg break can be a sort of injury that can sort of change the course of a fighter's career. So hopefully Jack Becker recovers well, and he's back in the cages, like you say, as soon as possible. But again, like you were saying, Hadden's put himself in a really good position. It's not really how you want to win the belt, but he's the champion now, and again, like we said last week, he was only really, taking on a big fight like this against Jack Becker, who's only 1 win away from just putting himself right back in the mix. I'm told he's hungrier than ever now. So and like you say, he's got the belt, and he's got a real opportunity to put himself back on the map here after three losses in a row against sort of tough opponents as well. He can, if he can defend the belt and sort of pick off some good wins, and like you say, he's right back in the mix. So, and did you notice, actually, speaking of the Martinez fight, did you notice in the pre-fight his little dig at Martinez there? He said he had fought Jack Becker before. He was preparing for the easiest fight in the lightweight division, but then he ended up going for the hardest fight in the lightweight division. I thought that was quite funny. That was when I saw that, I was really hopeful that didn't get lost in everything. So that was quite funny from Hadden there.
Yeah, some good subtle banter to throw in there. Well, I've seen there was a bit of I don't know. Obviously, he's been pretty active on the socials. Going back and forth with Dave a fair bit, asking him for the fight.
Has he ever? Yeah.
And just been relentless. So, maybe that kind of, we obviously saw recently that, Dave pulled out of, scrapped the fight because a guy went a bit too hard on the socials and was talking about his wife and doing a few things like that. So maybe obviously that might have been another factor that was kind of hindering Dave from taking the fight initially, but he was very vocal about it after his last win. When he beat Tim Schultz, he was pretty vocal about wanting the fight with Hadden. So, I'll be interested to see that fight. I'll be interested to see how it pans out. Obviously, it'd be an interesting one to throw together, and we'll find out. Is Hadden, is it the easiest fight in the division for him, or is it an absolute roadblock of a fight that's going to be, just very difficult for him? And is that, going to be a fight that Martinez can capitalize on and get the belt back?
Yeah, it'd be a fun little grudge match, wouldn't it? And Martinez is obviously a former Eternal champion, and he's coming off a win now, so he's got a little bit of momentum there. So maybe it's something that Eternal might throw together in the interim. Obviously, we're sort of Jack Becker's going to be sort of the shadow that's sort of cast over the division while he's recovering. But all that can be forgotten pretty quickly if Aiden puts on some impressive performances.
Yeah, and I feel like if you want to, you might depends on how you kind of want to throw it together. But if they might want Martinez to go and get one more win, and if that's the case, I wouldn't be mad at seeing a Dan Hill Martinez rematch. That'd be a cool fight to throw together because I know Martinez and his team were pretty sort of. They thought that they did enough to win that fight. And obviously ultimately Dan got the win in that fight. And obviously Dan lost to Togo, so he'd be sort of be looking to cement himself and get back in the mix. I did see that he's having a boxing fight soon, so I'm not sure if
Dan Hill is.
Yeah, I think he's having a boxing fight on the undercard for Honey's next fight. So I don't know if he's just pursuing the boxing now or what the go is, but there's a few sort of things that can be thrown together if we are talking about the fact that some of these guys need like another win or two before they can be look to be in a fight with Aiden. So there's a lot of movement happening there in that division now, and it's obviously a very, very stacked division.
Yeah, I think Dan Hill's recovering from a knee, like for an ACL maybe, perhaps. So that might be just a way to stay active while his knee's recovering. We know Tim Schultz did the same thing. They're obviously from the same gym.
Had a few
Tim
boxing
Schultz
fights.
took a couple of fights in boxing while he was recovering from some sort of a leg injury. So maybe that's sort of the thinking there, just to sort of stay active in the interim. But yeah, that's a fun rematch. I'd sign me up for that. Dan Hill versus Dave Martinez too.
Yeah, 100%. And then, obviously there's a few sort of other people that are lurking. I mean, it'd be interesting to see Josh Togo back in there and see what's him sort of get back in there and what's next for him. Obviously, my teammate Blakey was meant to fight Kuhn. That fell through. He'd be looking to get himself back in there. He's sort of obviously lurking. He's 5-1, so he's obviously up there already, kind of in the mix with things. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting sort of end to the year to see what happens in that division.
Absolutely, and what's going to be an interesting end to this episode is a fan question. Of course, we've got to get to one of these every week, and it's always an exciting time for us. But it's always a fun one. So this week's question comes from Raymond Friedman. He asks, if you could have a drink with any fighter, live or dead, who would it be?
Johnny motherfucking Jones. Johnny Bones Jones. Sign me up for that. I've thought about this. I was like, yeah, it'd be cool to sit down.
Is that a drink or a nose beer?
I'm sure we'll start with it. It'd be one where you start with some drinks and you end with some nose beers and potentially a hit and run against a pregnant woman. But, that's it. If you're going on a night out, you just kind of, what happens on a night out stays on a night out.
Absolutely,
allegedly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've thought a lot about this, and I was thinking like, it'd be cool to sit down with some of these other dudes and have a quiet drink and, talk to them about their careers and talk to them about fights and just general sort of conversation, especially I was thinking about it too. I was like, I'm a dad. Obviously there's a lot of these people that I could potentially be sitting down with their dads and be bond over those sort of things too. But then I thought, you know what, if the opportunity was there and it was between Cowboy and Jones, and I thought, I'd like to go on a night out with John Jones and have a couple of drinks. I'd like to see what happens and how that pans out. I'm sure, in a perfect world, you would look to avoid that at all costs because he's an absolute fucking nutcase. But it'd be a fun one if you were gonna do it. That's sort of be my pick. Would be Johnny Bones Jones is the go-to.
Absolutely, you'd certainly come out with some stories from a night like that, wouldn't you?
100%. I mean, my first question would be with him would be like, why were you hiding under the octagon, John? What were you doing? Why were you avoiding the USADA testers?
Yeah, maybe let him have a couple of beers before he unloads on that one.
100%.
Absolutely. Mine would be probably Justin Van Heerden. When are you coming down to Melbourne, mate?
Actually, that'd be good. Yeah, I reckon that'd be a night to remember in itself. I'm looking at the calendar. So I sort of spoke to Cam too, because obviously I enjoy fighting in Melbourne. I'm undefeated in Melbourne. I kind of think I've, taken over that city. It's pretty much my city now. So, I think, there's certainly there's times coming very soon in the next sort of couple of months where I think I'll be down there. So if that's the case, then for sure, if there's opportunity to have a couple of whiskeys and, sit down and do that, I'm going to be all for it. And people can then listen to Fight Talk Down Under, where we might potentially break down said nights and said drinks and might have some stories for some people.
Absolutely, yeah, we can make some stories, or at least make some up, just for the theatre of it. But I guess another one that would be a fun one to have a drink with would be Tito Ortiz, just to see if he gets any better or worse at speaking English, perhaps. But I could put that one on the table. But all jokes aside, probably my all-time favourite fighter, or certainly one of the first fighter that I really gravitated to, was Evander Holyfield. I don't even really know why. I loved Holyfield growing up. I obviously started, my sort of, passion for combat sports started watching boxing, and Holyfield was just my favourite fighter of all time. So it wouldn't be as exciting as as going out with John Jones, but and I'm not really convinced that Evander can actually string a sentence together anymore. But and I don't even know if he drinks, actually. Who knows? But it'd be just kind of fun to just pick his brain on on his career, and potentially, I don't know, I have a bit of a fascination with fighters that just kind of hang on for a bit too long, and Evander was certainly one of those. He fought. Well, I mean, he came back and he had that fight last year, I think, against Vitor Belfort at the age of 58, which was an absolute shit show. And that was hard to watch. But, he fought, in search of another world title opportunity until he was 48 years old. And he was still convinced that he was, a genuine contender at that point, when clearly anyone who watched him fight could see that he was cooked. So, that would be an interesting conversation for me. Obviously, he would have to have a couple of beers or something under his belt to really sort of broach the subject. But he'd be an interesting guy to talk to, just to, I don't know, just see guys that come from, he comes from a very different sort of background to myself as well. So it could be an interesting conversation, I'd have thought. So a little bit of a boring answer in comparison to yours, but that'd be a fun one, I reckon.
No, I'd be inclined to think that'd be a cool one. I think he'd have some interesting sort of insights and stories, not just from boxing, just from life as well. Anyone that's sort of his age is going to have those sort of things to share and touch on. It'd be a good one. I don't really know. Like, it's a good point. I don't know if the guy even drinks. And if you looked at him like during his career with a body like that, and it didn't look like he touched anything of any sorts that would hinder that. The guy was just looked like one of them Greek
Probably
statues.
Touched some things that would have helped that situation, of course.
But potentially, but I'd like to think he didn't, because he's such a likable guy. But yeah, maybe.
Absolutely, and I would probably have to shout the drinks as well, because I'm not sure that Evander actually has $2 to rub together at this point in his career. I think he was filed for bankruptcy. He's got I think he's got 11 kids from nine different women. So that's a fast track to bankruptcy right there. Well,
if ever there's a time to remind our listeners, guys, be safe out there. Okay, it's dangerous out in them streets. One moment you're out here having fun, the next moment you've got 11 kids to 9 different women. Don't do that.
That's right. Yeah, just don't give away your precious seed to just anyone.
Exactly. Find someone that you care about and do it that way. Don't do it in that scenario where you end up having to fight at 58 years old because you've got so many people to provide for.
That's right. Yep, absolutely. So, some solid advice there. So, to our listeners, you're welcome. And, of course, you're welcome, because we're going to be back for episode 18 next week, where we're going to recap all the fights from one championship, as well as Skye Nicholson, George Kambosos Jr. versus Devin Haney. And we'll be previewing UFC 275, which is stacked with Anzac talent. So that's going to be a fun one. We'll also be talking Sean Etchell, who's getting ready to compete at the Road to UFC in Singapore, as we mentioned earlier in this episode. So until then, send us through your fan questions. The details are below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to this, then it's at Dan Meehan MMA on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, or at Lockjaw MMA on Instagram to get Justin. And of course, we're. I should also mention we're finalising our latest sort of outreach for sponsors. So, if anyone's interested in sponsoring the podcast, if you've got a sort of fight related or health related sort of business, then we're all ears. We're open for sponsorships at the moment. So hit up either myself or Justin if you've got any interest in that. But if not, then at least like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, or Fight News Australia. What do you got for us, Lockjaw?
I'm going to leave you with this. You thought you guys were going to get through this episode without someone getting sprayed. Real quick, Alan Philpott, you're a fucking Gronk, buddy. You need to accept your loss and realize that you got beat. You got smashed. It was your 50th fight and you got beat. You didn't piece no one up. You didn't have no one hurt. You hit air for half the fight. You lost. So, yeah, just go ahead and deal with that. Get through Diego, maybe get a couple more wins. And then if you want to do it again, you know me, I ain't going to say no to anyone.
I gotta watch it. You never know what might stop you. Here I am, climbing up, feeling great, getting love. Here I go, risk it all.